The forest loomed before us, shrouded in mystery and whispered tales of strange phenomena. Sarah and I stood at the edge, our hearts racing with anticipation and nerves. We had planned this expedition for weeks, fueled by the thrill of the unknown. Dark trees stretched upwards, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers against the dimming sky. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and the chorus of nocturnal creatures. Every rustle and creak amplified our senses, feeding our excitement. Sarah gripped the map tightly, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, my own voice betraying a mix of fear and exhilaration. "Let's do it!" With that, we stepped into the forest, our flashlights cutting through the encroaching darkness. Each step echoed with a mixture of caution and eagerness, as if we were trespassing into a realm where the rules of daylight no longer applied. The path ahead twisted and turned, obscured by gnarled roots and fallen leaves. Shadows danced around us, playing tricks on our minds. Yet we pressed on, drawn deeper into the heart of the woods by an unseen force. As we ventured further, the forest seemed to come alive. Strange whispers brushed against our ears, too faint to decipher but unmistakably eerie. Sarah glanced at me, her expression a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "Do you hear that?" I nodded again, my senses on high alert. It's like the forest is trying to tell us something. We exchanged a nervous laugh, pushing forward with a newfound determination. The deeper we delved, the stronger the sensation that we were not alone. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every sound a hidden message, and yet, despite the unease creeping into our hearts, we couldn't deny the thrill of discovery. For in that moment, surrounded by ancient trees and the mysteries they held, Sarah and I knew that this journey into the unknown would change us forever. The forest grew denser as twilight settled around us, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with the fading light. Sarah and I exchanged glances, our flashlights now our only beacon in the growing darkness. We adventured deeper than planned, captivated by the mysteries that whispered through the trees. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead, a man, seemingly harmless at first glance. His clothes were worn and his face weathered by the elements, but his smile was warm and inviting. "Lost in these woods, are we?" His voice carried a hint of amusement, as if he knew something we didn't. Sarah took a cautious step forward, her flashlight illuminating his features. "We're exploring," she replied, her tone friendly yet wary. The man nodded knowingly, his eyes flickering with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Ah, exploring," he mused, his gaze lingering on us with an unsettling curiosity. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the unease creeping into my gut. "Do you know these woods well?" I asked, hoping to steer the conversation towards safer ground. He chuckled softly, a sound that echoed eerily in the quiet of the forest. "Oh, I know them better than most," he said cryptically, his words hanging in the air like a warning. As Sarah engaged him in polite conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The man's mannerisms were odd, his gestures too deliberate, his gaze too penetrating. I caught glimpses of movement in the shadows behind him, fleeting shapes that seemed to vanish when I blinked. Then, as if sensing my discomfort, his demeanor shifted. His smile faltered, revealing a glimpse of something darker beneath. "You shouldn't be here," he said suddenly, his voice low and urgent. My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain composed. He took a step closer, his presence now looming over us like a shadow. "This forest, it's not what it seems," he whispered, his eyes darting nervously to the trees around us. Before we could react, he lunged forward with surprising speed, his friendly facade crumbling away like dust. Sarah screamed, her voice piercing the night air as we scrambled to escape. Branches tore at my clothes, roots tripped me up, but adrenaline drove me forward, away from the man and deeper into the labyrinth of trees. Behind us, his laughter echoed, a chilling sound that fueled our flight through the darkness. The forest seemed to close in around us, its once mysterious allure now suffocating with a palpable sense of danger. Sarah and I stumbled through the underbrush, our breaths ragged and hearts pounding in terror. The echoes of the man's laughter haunted us, driving us deeper into the maze of shadows. "We have to keep moving," Sarah gasped, her voice trembling as she glanced over her shoulder. I nodded, my mind racing with fear and adrenaline. The man's warning echoed in my ears, a chilling reminder that we were not merely lost in the woods, but hunted. As we pushed forward, the forest seemed to conspire against us. Sarah's hand gripped mine tightly, our silent pact to stay together in the face of impending danger. Then, a voice cut through the darkness, a low, menacing growl that froze us in our tracks. "You can't hide!" it taunted, a cruel echo of the man's earlier facade. His footsteps echoed behind us, drawing closer with each heartbeat. My breath caught in my throat as I dared a glance back. His figure emerged from the shadows, his smile now a twisted grimace of malice. "You belong to me now," he declared, his voice dripping with predatory intent. Fear coursed through me, threatening to overwhelm reason. We were trapped, cornered in a game we never chose to play. Sarah whimpered beside me, her eyes wide with terror as she clung to my arm. But in that moment of despair, survival instinct kicked in. With renewed determination, I pulled Sarah along, dodging trees and leaping over fallen logs. "We can't let him catch us," I muttered through gritted teeth, my voice a desperate plea to the universe for salvation. And just as despair threatened to consume us, a distant light flickered through the trees, a beacon of hope in the abyss. We sprinted towards it, our lungs burning and muscles screaming in protest, driven by sheer terror and the will to live. Behind us, the man's laughter rang out once more, a haunting reminder of the evil lurking within the heart of the forest. Sarah and I ran blindly, our senses hyper-aware of every rustle and whisper that could betray our pursuer's approach. Adrenaline surged through my veins, propelling us forward despite the gnawing exhaustion and fear. Twigs snapped underfoot, branches clawed at our clothes, and the earth threatened to trip us at every turn, yet we dared not slow down. The urgency to escape, to survive, drove us deeper into the labyrinth of trees that seemed to conspire against our freedom. "Keep going!" I shouted to Sarah, my voice raw with desperation. She nodded frantically, her eyes wide with terror as she matched my pace. We veered left, then right, following paths that blurred into a maze of uncertainty. Behind us, the man's footsteps echoed ominously, a relentless reminder of our vulnerability. His laughter, a haunting soundtrack to our flight, echoed through the night, driving us onward with renewed panic. "We have to find a way out," Sarah gasped between labored breaths. Her fingers dug into my arm, her grip a lifeline in the chaos of our escape. I scanned the shadows ahead, searching desperately for any sign of a clearing, a road, anything that could lead us to safety. A distant glimmer caught my eye, a faint light filtering through the dense foliage. "There!" I exclaimed, hope igniting in my chest. "We need to head towards that light!" With renewed determination, we veered towards the elusive beacon, crashing through underbrush and leaping over obstacles that threatened to impede our path. The forest seemed to relent, ever so slightly, as if offering a fleeting respite from the relentless pursuit. But we dared not slow down, and as we burst into the clearing, gasping for breath and hearts pounding with exertion, relief washed over us like a cleansing tide. The night air felt cooler, the shadows less ominous in the open space that welcomed us. "We made it," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with exhaustion and disbelief. But even in our moment of fleeting victory, the echoes of the man's laughter lingered, a chilling reminder that the darkness of the forest held secrets far darker than we dared to imagine. We huddled together in the small alcove, our breaths shallow and hearts hammering against our chests. The darkness enveloped us like a suffocating blanket, punctuated only by the faint rustling of leaves and the distant echoes of the man's footsteps. Fear gripped us in its icy embrace, every nerve on edge as we strained to remain unseen. Sarah pressed closer to me, her trembling form a mirror of my own unease. We dared not speak, afraid that even the softest whisper would betray our hiding place. Every sound amplified, the rustle of a nearby bush, the distant call of an owl, all potential harbingers of our impending capture. Footsteps drew near, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sent shivers down my spine. I held my breath, willing the darkness to shield us from view. The man's presence loomed just beyond our hiding spot, his shadow passing mere inches away. I felt Sarah's grip tighten on my arm, her silent plea for safety echoing in the darkness. But miraculously, the footsteps resumed, a slow, steady retreat that faded into the night. Relief washed over us like a tidal wave, leaving us trembling in its wake. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, her silent sobs a testament to the terror we had narrowly escaped. Minutes passed in tense silence, our bodies still primed for flight at the slightest provocation. Only when the forest settled into an uneasy calm did we dare to breathe a sigh of cautious relief. "We have to keep moving," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the stillness. Sarah nodded wordlessly, her fear-stricken gaze meeting mine in a silent pact of solidarity. With trembling limbs and hearts still racing, we emerged from our fragile sanctuary, determined to put as much distance as possible between ourselves and the darkness that had nearly consumed us. As we ventured back into the maze of trees, the night whispered its secrets, a chilling reminder of the peril that lurked within the shadows. But we pressed on, driven by the primal instinct to survive and the desperate hope that dawn would bring salvation from the horrors of the night. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah and I cautiously emerged from our hiding place, our senses still on high alert. The forest around us lay cloaked in an eerie silence, broken only by the faint sounds of nocturnal creatures and the distant rustling of leaves. We exchanged a wary glance, our eyes reflecting the lingering fear that clung to us like a second skin. Every rustle in the underbrush sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins, a reminder of the perilous game we had unwittingly stumbled into. "We need to keep moving," Sarah murmured, her voice strained with exhaustion and lingering terror. I nodded in agreement, my throat tight with unspoken dread. The night air felt heavy with unseen threats, every shadow a potential hiding place for danger yet unknown. But we had no choice. We had to find a way out of this labyrinth of trees and uncertainty. Step by cautious step, we navigated through the tangled undergrowth, our movements slow and deliberate to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Each passing moment felt like a fragile truce with fate, as if the slightest misstep could plunge us back into the nightmare we had narrowly escaped. The darkness seemed to press in around us, its weight a constant reminder of our vulnerability. My breath came in ragged gasps, the adrenaline-fueled rush of survival keeping me going despite the ache in my muscles and the raw edges of fear that threatened to overwhelm reason. Sarah stumbled ahead, her footsteps faltering as she glanced nervously over her shoulder. "Do you think he's still out there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sighing of the wind. I paused, straining my senses for any sign of pursuit. The forest remained eerily silent, its secrets hidden in the shadows that stretched like fingers across our path. "I don't know," I admitted quietly, my own uncertainty a bitter taste on my tongue. But we couldn't afford to dwell on fear or doubt. With renewed resolve, we pressed forward, guided by the faint glimmer of moonlight that filtered through the canopy above. Each stride brought us closer to the hope of escape, a fragile beacon in the vast expanse of the unknown. As we ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, the night whispered its secrets, a symphony of unseen dangers and untold mysteries. Yet, amidst the darkness and uncertainty, we clung to the flickering promise of dawn, a promise that with each step, we were one step closer to safety and the light that awaited beyond the edge of this haunted wood. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with tension and the lingering traces of our earlier terror. Sarah and I moved cautiously, our nerves still raw from the encounter with the mysterious man. Every shadow, every rustle in the underbrush sent a jolt of apprehension through my already frayed nerves. As we rounded a bend in the path, a new obstacle loomed before us, a figure hunched over and unmoving. My heart leapt into my throat, fear constricting my chest as I strained to make out the shape in the dim light. "Who's there?" Sarah called out, her voice a mixture of caution and urgency. The figure stirred, its movement slow and deliberate. A chill ran down my spine as it turned towards us, revealing a face twisted with anguish and a gaze that pierced through the darkness with unnerving intensity. "Help!" A hoarse whisper escaped its lips, a plea that echoed through the silent woods. I hesitated, uncertainty warring with compassion in my heart. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for our next move. Sarah glanced at me, her eyes wide with indecision. "We can't just leave them," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the pounding of my own heartbeat. With hesitant steps, we approached the figure, a woman, her clothes torn and face streaked with dirt and tears. Her eyes bore into mine, a silent plea for salvation from whatever horrors had befallen her in this forsaken place. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain composed. She shook her head, a shudder rippling through her frail form. "They're out there," she whispered, her gaze flickering nervously to the shadows that closed in around us. Before we could press her for more, a distant sound shattered the fragile calm, a low growl that reverberated through the trees, sending a shiver of dread down my spine. Sarah gasped, her hand clutching mine in a vice-like grip. "They're coming!" the woman breathed, her eyes wide with terror. Without another word, we turned and ran, the woman stumbling behind us in a desperate bid for survival. Branches lashed at our faces, roots threatened to trip us at every turn, but we dared not slow down. The growls grew louder, closer, driving us onward with renewed urgency. "We have to find a way out!" Sarah panted, her voice a frantic plea against the encroaching darkness. Ahead, a break in the trees offered a fleeting glimpse of moonlit sky, a beacon of hope in the relentless night. With every ounce of strength left in us, we pushed forward, driven by the primal instinct to survive and the harrowing knowledge that danger lurked just behind. And as we burst into the clearing, lungs burning and hearts racing, we knew that the battle for our lives had only just begun. Relief flooded through us as we stumbled into a small clearing bathed in moonlight. The sounds of pursuit faded into the distance, swallowed by the dense foliage that surrounded our sanctuary. Sarah and I collapsed to the ground, our chests heaving with exertion and hearts still racing from the adrenaline-fueled escape. "We made it," Sarah breathed, her voice a mix of disbelief and gratitude. I nodded, too exhausted to speak, but the weight of our survival hung heavy in the air. The clearing offered a brief respite from the relentless terror of the forest, a haven where we could catch our breath and gather our wits. The night air was cool against my sweat-drenched skin, a welcome contrast to the suffocating darkness that had threatened to consume us. Stars twinkled overhead, offering a glimmer of hope in the vast expanse of uncertainty that stretched beyond the tree line. "We should rest here for a bit," I suggested, my voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Gather our strength before we move on." Sarah nodded wearily, her eyes closing briefly as she leaned against a nearby tree. We sat in silence, the sounds of the forest around us gradually calming our frayed nerves. The distant hoot of an owl, the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze, all whispered of a world that existed beyond fear and danger. As minutes stretched into moments of peaceful solitude, I allowed myself to relax for the first time since our ordeal began. The ground beneath us felt solid and reassuring, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had plagued our every step. But even in our moment of respite, the urgency to find safety and escape this haunted wood lingered at the edges of my consciousness. We couldn't afford to stay here indefinitely, not when the threat of the forest's dark secrets still loomed large. "We should keep moving soon," I said softly, breaking the silence that had settled between us. Sarah nodded, her gaze steady and determined. "We'll find a way out of here," she replied with quiet resolve. With renewed determination, we rose to our feet, each movement a testament to the strength and resilience that had carried us through the nightmarish trials of the forest. The clearing, once a haven of temporary safety, now served as a launching pad for our next steps towards freedom. Together, we ventured back into the shadows, guided by the distant promise of dawn and the unshakable hope that somewhere beyond this dark labyrinth, salvation awaited. The forest whispered around us, its secrets held close in the shifting shadows and rustling leaves. Sarah and I found a secluded spot beneath the canopy, a temporary sanctuary where we could finally take stock of our situation and plan our next moves. "We can't keep running blindly," Sarah said, her voice tinged with determination as she scanned our surroundings for any sign of danger. I nodded in agreement, the weight of our recent trials pressing heavily upon my shoulders. "We need a plan," I murmured, my thoughts racing to formulate a strategy that would lead us safely out of this labyrinth of fear. The moon cast a silvery glow over our makeshift campsite, lending an ethereal quality to the solemnity of our discussion. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound seemed magnified in the stillness, a reminder of the perils that lurked just beyond our fragile refuge. "We should try to find higher ground," I suggested, gesturing towards the distant rise of hills that promised a vantage point over the surrounding forest. "Maybe we can spot a way out from there." Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. "And we need to stay alert," she added, her eyes scanning the darkness with wary vigilance. "We can't afford to be caught off guard again." With a shared understanding, we began to outline our plan, a cautious ascent to higher ground, keeping to cover and avoiding unnecessary risks. The forest seemed to hold its breath as we prepared to embark on the next leg of our journey, the air thick with unspoken fears and quiet resolve. As we gathered our belongings and readied ourselves to move, a sense of purpose settled over us, a stark contrast to the frantic flight that had marked our earlier struggles. The clearing, once a temporary respite, now served as a launching point for our determination to find a way out of this treacherous maze. With each step, we carried with us the lessons learned from our harrowing ordeal, a testament to our resilience and the unyielding hope that guided us through the darkest hours of the night. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty, yet in the quiet determination that bound us together, I found a glimmer of optimism that whispered of brighter days beyond the looming shadows.